Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Making a Difference Conference 2020. I'd like to introduce Dr. Ross Greene. He's a clinical psychologist and the originator of the innovative evidence-based approach called collaborative and proactive solutions, or CPS, as described in his influential books, The Explosive Child, Lost at School, Lost and Found, my favorite, Raising Human Beings. He has also developed and executive produced the award-winning documentary film, The Kids We Lose, released in 2018. In 2009, he founded the nonprofit Lives in the Balance. If we were to describe all of Dr. Greene's accomplishments, we would use up all of our time with him. So I invite you to read his bio for more details. Now, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Ross Greene. Thank you, Ross, for joining us today.
Mary Beth, thank you for inviting me to do this, and good morning, everybody. I'm very glad that we are able to be together virtually, at least, during these very, very interesting and difficult times. I'm going to jump right in because I have a lot to cover, and I do want to leave time for questions at the end if I can. If we can manage that. The title, what we now know about kids with concerning behaviors and how it should change how we help them, especially during a pandemic. I actually haven't changed the guidance that I give people about how to help kids with concerning behaviors because of the pandemic. I just think that the approach that I've always recommended is especially crucial during the pandemic. These are very difficult times for kids, many of them, difficult times for their parents, many of them, very difficult time for educators, difficult time all the way around. We need to be collaborative, especially during very difficult times. So I'm going to answer the question, what we now know, right off the bat here. What we now know about kids with concerning behaviors is that they are lacking skills, not motivation. That is a really crucial recognition to come to. It is supported by research that has accumulated on kids with concerning behaviors over the last 40 to 50 years. This is a slam dunk. Kids with concerning behaviors are lacking skills. Now, those lacking skills can be placed into 5 categories if we wanted to. For some very good reasons, we actually don't want to, but those 5 categories are executive skills, language processing and communication skills, emotion regulation skills, cognitive flexibility skills, social skills. The reason we don't want to break the skills up into these 5 categories is, number one, these categories aren't very specific. Number two, they're fake. I know we were all taught that they are real, but they are actually not real. They're fake. There is so much overlap among these 5 categories that it is truly artificial to pretend that they are discrete entities. They are not discrete entities. They are fake. There is a tremendous amount of overlap between the skills we call executive and the skills we refer to as language processing and communication. So much overlap, it's actually hard to tell them apart a lot of the time. A lot of overlap between the skills embedded within those 2 artificial categories and those that are involved in helping human beings regulate their emotions, and those that are involved in being flexible and adaptable, and those that are required for adaptive social functioning. They're fake. But fake or not, that's just the categories. What's real is that kids who exhibit concerning behaviors are lacking important skills. And that's true pretty much irrespective of which concerning behaviors they are exhibiting. Now, I used to call them challenging behaviors, but some of the behaviors kids exhibit because they are lacking these skills are less concerning than others. I like to break up the universe of children's behaviors into two categories, lucky and unlucky. But here's the deal on those behaviors. They all communicate something, and they all communicate the exact same thing. I'm stuck. There are expectations I'm having difficulty meeting. That's what concerning behaviors communicate. I'm stuck. I'm struggling. There are expectations I'm having difficulty meeting. Now, some kids communicate through their behavior that there are expectations they're having difficulty meeting in ways that are lucky. What are lucky ways of communicating that? Let's start with the holy grail of lucky, using your words. It doesn't get any better than that, especially if they're the right words. But also lucky, whining, pouting, sulking, withdrawing, crying. Why are those ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations lucky? Those ways aren't going to get you popped into timeout. Those ways are not going to get you held in from recess, not going to get you held after school, not going to get you a detention, suspension, expulsion, not going to get you hit. Still very popular in the United States of America. Also still popular in schools in 19 different states. We still hit kids. Many people don't know this. We still hit kids on the butt with a piece of wood hundreds of thousands of times every school year in the United States of America. Those lucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations are not going to get you pinned to the ground by 2 to 4 big adults in what is known as a restraint, not going to get you thrown into a locked, padded room in what is known as a seclusion, but best of all, those lucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations are highly likely to elicit empathy from your caregivers. Lucky you, kid. That's not who I've been working with for the last 40 plus years. I've been working with the unlucky variety. What are unlucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations? You already know, but here's a sampling: screaming, swearing, hitting, spitting, kicking, biting, throwing, destroying, running. Why are those ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations unlucky? Well, at the mild end, those ways are going to get you popped into timeout. They are going to get you held in from recess, held after school, detention, now we're getting more serious, suspension, expulsion, hit, pinned, thrown. But worst of all, those ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations are far less likely to elicit empathy from your caregivers, even though the field of developmental psychopathology has been telling us for a very long time that whether you are communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations in ways that are lucky or unlucky, your behavior is communicating the exact same thing. I'm stuck. There are expectations I'm having difficulty meeting. And what the research tells us is that you are lacking crucial skills. And that's true whether you are diagnosed with ADHD or oppositional defiant disorder or conduct disorder, what we refer to as the externalizing end of the spectrum, or whether you are depressed or anxious, the so-called internalizing part of the spectrum. Here's what's interesting. Either way, you're lacking skills. There's a field of study called transdiagnostics that tells us that no matter how you are expressing that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations, if you're doing that through behaviors that are concerning, you're lacking crucial skills. And they're pretty much the same skills, whether you're lucky or unlucky. Now, here's the interesting thing. I'm not talking about unlucky or lucky as it relates to how the kid is feeling. Depressed and anxious kids are feeling very bad. They are in pain. They are struggling. Talking, when I refer to lucky and unlucky, about how we respond to them. What does the research tell us? We tend to respond to anxiety and depression with empathy and nurturance and support. Not so kids who are communicating that they're having difficulty meeting certain expectations in ways that are unlucky. We have got to get that right. In this model, a signal is a signal is a signal. Signals concerning behaviors communicate the same thing. We have got to get that right. Otherwise, we will continue losing kids who communicate that they're having difficulty meeting certain expectations in ways that are unlucky at astounding rates, because those are the kids who are on the receiving end of the most punitive interventions we adults have to offer. All right. Now you know what we now know. You may have known that already, but now you know what we know. This is about lagging skills, not lagging motivation. If this is not about lagging motivation, then all those motivational strategies we've been throwing at these kids shouldn't have been expected to work. Unmotivated is not what they are. They're lacking skills. All right. As the title of the talk said, that's also going to change not only how we go about viewing them, but also how we go about trying to help them. And as it relates to how we go about trying to help them, there are 5 very important themes that I am about to cover, 5 big shifts. If you combine the words shift and cover, then it comes out as shover, just so you know. Big shift number 1. We need to stop focusing on their behavior. We need to start focusing on the problems that are causing that behavior. If all we're focused on is behavior, then we will be pointed to behavior modification strategies that solve no problems and enhance no skills. Timeouts do not solve any problems or enhance any skills. Keeping a kid in from recess doesn't. Holding a kid after school doesn't. Detentions don't. Suspensions don't. Expulsions don't. Hitting a kid doesn't. Restraint and seclusion don't. Counting to 3 solves no problems and teaches no skills. Stickers solve no problems and teach no skills. I know that for those of you who work with younger kids, for some of you, that was perhaps the most devastating piece of news of all, but stickers do not solve any problems, nor do they enhance any skills. I consider that a very limiting approach to trying to help kids. We need to focus on the problems that are causing their challenging behaviors, not the behaviors themselves. As you've already heard, behavior is just the signal, just the fever. Now, if you were trained the way I was, then you were trained to believe that behaviors are the only objective, observable, quantifiable data. But that's not true. B.F. Skinner did tell us that overt behavior was the only thing that's observable, objective, and quantifiable, but we often forget that B.F. Skinner also talked every bit as much about the conditions in which those behaviors occur. which, by the way, are just as observable, just as objective, just as quantifiable. In this model, you are focused on those conditions. You are not focused on the signals that are occurring in those conditions. Now, we don't call them conditions in this model, not allergic to the term, just not what we call them. We don't call them antecedents either, not allergic to the term, just not what we call them. We use two terms in this model to refer to what B.F. Skinner was talking about when he talked about conditions. We use either unmet expectations. When do all human beings exhibit concerning behaviors? When there are expectations we're having difficulty meeting. It's true of all of us. So unmet expectations is a great synonym for what B.F. Skinner referred to as conditions, but the preferred term is unsolved problems, also known as problems that have yet to be solved, also known as problems that are waiting to be solved. Waiting for who? Waiting for you, but not if you're primarily focused on the signals, the behaviors, whether lucky or unlucky, whether internalizing or externalizing, whether there's a diagnosis or not. This kid has expectations he's having difficulty meeting. And that's when this kid is exhibiting concerning behaviors. Now, as you might imagine, that's going to require different assessment technology, because what do we primarily assess, not only in our schools, but also in our clinics and in our facilities? When we are working with a kid who has concerning behaviors, we assess the behaviors. We do behavior checklists. We do behavior observations. We do a functional behavior assessment, all so that we can come up with a behavior plan, all focused on the signals. In this model, you are using an instrument called, and I'll introduce it to you briefly a little bit later, called the Assessment of Lagging Skills and Unsolved Problems, to get the information that we've been missing. Oh, we've known what the kid's behavior has been for a long time. We've known what the kid's diagnoses are for a long time. The information that's been missing. What are this kid's lagging skills? What are this kid's unsolved problems? That's the information that's been missing. And because that information has been missing, often we have been focused exclusively on the signals rather than on solving problems and enhancing skills. As you can tell, that's a big shift. Here's another big shift. Now that we are solving problems instead of modifying behaviors, we need to think about what kind of problem solvers we want to be. We adults tend to be real keen on problem solving of the unilateral kind. That's where the adult decides what the solution is and imposes it on the kid. Not this model. In this model, we operate on a very important assumption. You want to solve a problem with a kid, you're going to need a teammate. You're going to need a partner. Who's your partner? Kid. And by the way, generally speaking, the kid is going to be delighted to help you out. Kid's been wondering for a very long time. How come we adults keep trying to make things better without the kid's input, without the kid's involvement, without information from the kid, without the kid's ideas, without the kid's sign off? This is problem solving of the collaborative kind. It's something you're doing with the kid, not to the kid. Ooh-wee. That's a big shift. Big shift number 3. If you're going to be solving problems collaboratively, you're also going to want to do it proactively. 99% of what you're doing in this model is planned. proactive. Now, here are the logical and usual questions that come immediately after I say that. How can we be planned and proactive when we never know when the kid's going to blow? When the kid's always getting upset from out of the blue? When the kid is so unpredictable? Here are the answers. The kid is not unpredictable. The kid is not blowing up from out of the blue. You know exactly when the kid is going to get upset if you answer two questions right up front. And those two questions are why and when. As in, why are challenging kids challenging? Why is this challenging kid challenging? When are challenging kids challenging? When is this challenging kid challenging? Those are precisely the two questions that are going to be answered by the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems. Because why are challenging kids challenging? Once again, this is what the research has been telling us for 40 to 50 years now. It's because they're lacking the skills to not be challenging. Not lagging motivation, lagging skills. That is a much more accurate, much more compassionate, much more productive answer to the question, why? And the assessment of lagging skills is going to help you figure out what this kid's lagging skills are so that you have the right lenses on. When are challenging kids challenging? When is this challenging kid challenging? When expectations outstrip skills. In other words, when kids are having difficulty meeting certain expectations. Thank goodness. The assessment of lagging skills also helps us figure out this kid's unsolved problems. Because if we don't identify the unsolved problems, we won't know what problems need to be solved. The very problems that are setting in motion concerning behaviors. Once you figure out what a kid's lagging skills and unsolved problems are, this is a very predictable kid, and intervention can be almost exclusively proactive. What I say to the parents and educators and staff members in facilities that I work with is, one of my favorite phrases is, I'm going to get you out of the heat of the moment. Very little good happens in the heat of the moment. All the good stuff happens proactively. A few more big shifts. The one that you, if you know my work, this is probably the phrase that you remember the best. Kids do well if they can. This is the belief that if this kid could do well, this kid would do well. If this kid isn't doing well, something must be getting in the kid's way. And now you know what's getting in the kid's way. Lagging skills, unsolved problems. Except that that's not what we've been thinking for most of human evolution about kids with concerning behaviors. What have we been thinking about them? We've been thinking kids do well if they wanna. Kids do all if they can and kids do all if they wanna are two completely different mentalities. They are going to lead you in completely different directions. If you have kids do well if they wanna lenses on, then the reason you think this kid isn't doing well is because he doesn't wanna do well, or worse yet, you're thinking that doing poorly is working out better for the kid than doing well would, which makes no sense whatsoever, but leads us to say things about unlucky kids, kids with concerning behaviors that are not true, like attention seeking, manipulative, coercive, unmotivated, limit testing, etc. Not true. And we don't say those things anymore once we figure out what a kid's lagging skills and unsolved problems are. Those things make no sense if you figure out what a kid's lagging skills and unsolved problems are. which, by the way, is about a 30 to 45-minute process, once again, using the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems. The assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems should be the standard pre-referral triage instrument in every school. Gonna save you a lot of testing referrals. Gonna save you a lot of functional behavior assessments. Here's what I often say. You figure out what the kid's lagging skills and unsolved problems are, it's gonna write your FBA for you. You figure out what a kid's lagging skills and unsolved problems are, it's gonna write your IEP for you. And yes, on the website of my nonprofit that I founded, Lives in the Balance, you will find a CPS flavored FBA, and you will find a CPS flavored IEP. The CPS flavored 504 plan and the CPS flavored behavior plan are coming soon. If this kid could do well, this kid would do well. Kids do well if they can. Finally, big shift number 5 before we get into some technicalities. I think I'm doing well on time, but I have no idea. Doing well is preferable. For me, that is a statement of the obvious. Of course, doing well is preferable. A preference for doing well is why all of us do well most of the time. We prefer it. So do kids with concerning behaviors. Kids with concerning behaviors prefer doing well too. The difference between a kid who's well-behaved and a kid who is exhibiting concerning behaviors is not that the well-behaved kid prefers doing well and the kid with concerning behaviors doesn't. It's that the kid with concerning behaviors is lacking skills. Wow. That's a change of pace for a lot of people, especially if you were trained the way I was a very long time ago. Let's move on. I'm going to do questions at the end, but I want to make sure that we cement these points home. I am not allergic to reward and punishment programs. It's just that I haven't used any in 30 years. Why not? Because as we have already established, rewarding and punishing in whatever form solves no problems, enhances no skills. Worse yet, rewarding and punishing is distracting. Rewards and punishments cause us to focus on signals, behaviors, rather than on the problems that are causing those signals. Worse yet, as I'm assuming all of you already know, there is significant disproportionality in the ways in which rewards and especially punishments are administered in schools in the United States of America. Black and brown students receive punitive discipline greatly out of proportion to their numbers. That's well established. That's absolutely, unmistakably true. And there are lots of explanations for that. And I could spend 3 hours talking about why that might be true. There's just a rather massive literature out there about the variety of factors that could be contributing to disproportionality. Let me summarize my thinking, though, with one line. If you're going to be disproportional, better to be disproportional in solving problems with students than on doling out detentions, suspensions, expulsions, paddling, restraint, seclusion. Some kids need more help than others. That doesn't mean they need more punitive discipline. That means they need us to, first of all, be figuring out what is this kid's lagging skills? What are this kid's unsolved problems? And getting busy, not being punitive, which is focused on the behaviors they might be exhibiting, but rather in solving the problems that are walking into our building every day. I'm going to skip this slide in the interest of time. What are the two most important roles a helper can play in the life of a kid who's struggling? Two roles. I like to keep things simple. Role number one, got to figure out what this kid's lagging skills and unsolved problems are. Once again, that's the information that's been missing. The assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems is free. It's on the website. It's a 30 to 45-minute meeting. The meetings are happening already. I'll repeat what I said earlier just to beat it to death. The assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems should be the standard pre-referral triage instrument in our schools. Going to save you a lot of money that way, and a lot of time too. Money on testing that you may not have needed to do. Time on how much time it takes to do the testing and the functional behavior assessment, when it's entirely possible that the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems would give us the information that we most badly need. Once again, lagging skills are for lenses, lagging skills, not lagging motivation. And it makes concerning behaviors highly predictable. Most importantly, therefore, it makes intervention almost exclusively proactive. So you are no longer in what we might call perpetual survival mode. Perpetual survival mode is when you've got a kid either in your classroom or your home or your facility who is exhibiting so much challenging behavior and has so many not yet identified unsolved problems that you are just weathering the storm on an ongoing basis. You're not in perpetual survival mode in this model. You know what this kid's lagging skills and unsolved problems are. You have the right lenses on. You know what problems you're working on. You're also not walking on eggshells in this model. Walking on eggshells means you never know when the kid's going to blow. In this model, not only do you know exactly when the kid is going to blow, you know exactly what you need to be working on so it doesn't happen. And then part two, we need to solve those problems collaboratively and proactively. When we solve problems with kids collaboratively and proactively, you and the kid are partners, teammates. This is not enemies. This is not adversaries. Never needed to be. When you're solving problems collaboratively and proactively, you are engaging kids in solving the problems that affect their lives. I'm always asking people, why would you want to leave the kid out of the loop on that? When you're solving problems collaboratively and proactively, you and the kid are together coming up with solutions that are a whole lot more effective and a whole lot more durable because you're not flying solo. And as we have already established, what the research is telling us is that just by solving problems collaboratively and proactively with kids, you are simultaneously enhancing the very skills they're lacking just by engaging them in the process of solving problems collaboratively and proactively. All right, here it is. The ALSUP 2020, Assessment of Lagging Skills and Unsolved Problems 2020 version. We just released this a week or two ago. It is a somewhat modified version of the instrument that we've always used. What you're seeing in the top section is lagging skills, and not hundreds of them, although the research has identified hundreds of skills that can be found lagging in kids with concerning behaviors. Here you've only got 18. You don't need hundreds of lagging skills to get the right lenses on. You need 18. He's lacking skills. I was doing an ALSUP yesterday afternoon about a kid, a 5-year-old in Maine. And if with luck, we'll be posting that video on the Lives in the Balance website. So as a demonstration for how you use the ALSUP, and almost every single lagging skill was checked off. In the bottom, and what does that tell us? He's lacking skills, not motivation. Now, if you already know the kid is lacking skills, then you've already got the right lenses on. that top section is mostly for people who don't know that yet and who are still saying things like attention seeking, manipulative, coercive, unmotivated, limit testing, blah, blah, blah. In the bottom section, you are identifying all of the expectations the kid is having difficulty meeting using the prompts, and this is the new part of the ALSUP, using prompts that are in the unsolved problems section. There's prompts that you can use when you are working in a school or facility, and there are prompts that you use when you are trying to identify unsolved problems at home or in a clinic. The lagging skills section should take no more than 5 minutes to complete because you're not splitting hairs on lagging skills. You're not obsessing about whether to check one off or not. If it seems to be true, you check it off. Unsolved problems should take, I don't know, a minute each to write. I would say that the average kid with concerning behaviors has somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 50 unsolved problems, which means that completing the ALSUP should take 25 to 55 minutes. And then you've got it, the information that's been missing. More importantly, everybody in that meeting now has the right lenses on, lagging skills, not lagging motivation, and everybody in that meeting now knows the mountain that lies before us. All of those unsolved problems that have accumulated over the years, sitting right there before our very eyes. Now, we're not going to be able to work on them all at once. We're going to have to prioritize, but at least we finally have that information. And at no point when you are completing this instrument, are you talking about the kid's signals? At no point are you talking about the kid's diagnoses. Here's why. I was speaking in Denmark about a year and a half ago, I guess it was that long ago, at an autism conference. And a mother in my audience raised her hand very tentatively and said, but I found my daughter's autism diagnosis to be very useful. I said, good. She said, but I think what you're saying is that my daughter's autism diagnosis didn't really tell me anything about her specific lagging skills and unsolved problems. I said, right. She pondered it a bit further and then said, I think what you're saying is that once I figure out what my daughter's lagging skills and unsolved problems are, I'm going to discover that that autism diagnosis really wasn't telling me all that much at all. I said, probably. And I would say the same thing about ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, depression, anxiety. This gives you the information that's been missing. Now let's turn our attention to pretty much the last thing I'm going to talk about. Once we identify the unsolved problems, it is our job to solve them. How do we solve them? Well, you have 3 options for dealing with unsolved problems, and those 3 options are called Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. Now, you're really only using 2 of them in this model, B and C. Plan A is just up there as a reference point because it's still so popular. You're almost never using Plan A when you're implementing collaborative and proactive solutions. What I've done here is I've taken the many different ways in which adults respond to problems in kids, and I've reduced them to 3 basic options, A, B, C. Notice at the top, unsolved is underlined. That's because if a problem isn't unsolved, you don't need one of these plans. It's a met expectation, no plan needed. For example, if a kid is doing their homework as well and as often as you'd like them to, you don't need a plan. It's not an unsolved problem. It's a met expectation, no plan needed. If a kid is going to school as well and as often as you want them to, you don't need a plan. It's not an unsolved problem. It's a met expectation, no plan needed. But if there's any expectation a kid is having difficulty reliably meeting, you need a plan. And you got 3 options, A, B, C. In this model, you're only using 2, B and C. Let's start with Plan C. Plan C is where you are setting aside a particular unsolved problem, at least for now. Now, many people hear that, and their first thought is giving in. No, there's no giving in the entire model. Giving up, no giving up in the entire model. Prioritizing, you are prioritizing in this model. If this kid has 20 to 50 unsolved problems, as we've already established, you're not going to be able to work on them all at once. In fact, you'll never be working on more than 3 unsolved problems at any particular given point in time, never more than 3. What are you doing with the rest? For now, you're setting them aside. Forever? No, for now. When will we start working on some of those that we set aside? After we've solved some of our higher priority unsolved problems. So prioritizing is actually a big deal in this model. What I say to people in special ed classrooms and therapeutic facilities is the following. I hate seeing kids get restrained and secluded for expectations we already know they can't meet. Part of the process of identifying unsolved problems is giving very conscious, deliberate thought to whether the kid is even able to meet the expectation at this point in the kid's development. Because it's a shame for a kid to be restrained or secluded because of the behaviors the kid is exhibiting on expectations we already know the kid cannot meet. So that tells you something else, that Plan C is not just about prioritizing. Plan C is also about stabilizing. Because any unsolved problem you have removed from the kid's radar screen, at least for now, won't set in motion concerning behaviors because you've removed that expectation for now. Which would I rather use to stabilize a kid? Plan C or an atypical antipsychotic medication? Definitely Plan C. Has no side effects. Now, are there kids that I work with who still need medication for stabilization purposes? Yes. What does that tell you? Plans B and C weren't enough to give us a satisfactory level of stabilization. But if I can get stabilization with Plan C instead of medication, by golly, I'll do it. It's prioritizing, and it's getting rid of expectations we already know the kid hasn't got a snowball's chance of meeting, at least at this point in the kid's development. That leaves us with only 2 other plans, A and B. Both represent a way to solve a problem with a kid. There's just one massive difference between them. With Plan A, you're solving the problem unilaterally. With Plan B, you're solving the problem collaboratively. You know which plan you're using in a model called collaborative and proactive solutions. Does that mean that we are allergic to Plan A? No, not allergic. We just don't think it's a very good idea. But if a kid's about to dart in front of a speeding car in a parking lot, you're not doing Plan C. You're not saying, you know what? This was not one of our high priority. You're not doing Plan B. You're too late. I've noticed you're doing Plan A. You yank on the kid's arm, you save his life. If he blows up, so be it. But if 3 weeks later, the kid has now darted in front of a speeding car an additional 17 times, and you've yanked an additional 17 times, I'll agree. Plan A is working at saving the kid's life, but Plan A is not working at solving this problem. You're going to need a different plan. And if you decide that parking lots are not one of your high priorities right now, at this point in this kid's development, you're using Plan C. You're saying, you know what, we need to make sure that this kid doesn't end up in parking lots anytime soon. And if you decide that parking lots are an important part of this kid's development and that expectation is within reach, at this point in this kid's development, you are using Plan B. All right. Plan B. How do you solve a problem collaboratively? There are 3 steps. They are called the empathy step, the define adult concern step, and the invitation step. I hope you're recognizing at this point that I am going into detail about very little here. If I had 3 hours, I could go into detail, but in 1 hour, you get the basics. If you want more, hop onto the Lives in the Balance website, livesinthebalance.org, and you will, if you've never been on the website, discover an absolute treasure trove of free information on everything I'm talking about here. 3 steps for solving a problem collaboratively and proactively. They are called the empathy step, the define adult concern step, and the invitation step. As I always tell people, the names of the steps are not very important. The ingredients are very important. What's the main ingredient of the empathy step? Information gathering. Gathering information from the kid about what's making it hard for the kid to meet a particular expectation. Whether that's brushing teeth before going to bed at night, or taking the trash out on Tuesday mornings, or getting off the Xbox to come in for dinner, or going to bed by a certain time, or getting out of bed by a certain time to get ready for school. I could go on forever. The empathy step is where you are gathering information from the kid about what's making it hard for them to meet that expectation. It could also be difficulty completing the double-digit division problems on the worksheet in math, difficulty sitting next to Polly during circle time, difficulty agreeing on the rules of the Foursquare game with Billy at recess. Your number one source of information on understanding what's making it hard for a kid to meet a particular expectation is the kid, not you. As I'm always telling caregivers, it's not your job to know. It's your job to know how to find out. Some of you are now thinking, what if the kid's nonverbal? We have our ways. What if the kid is very compromised in the language processing or communication realm? We have our ways. What if the kid says, I don't know a lot? Sounds pretty typical to me. We have our ways. We are going to get information from the kid about what's making it hard for them to meet this expectation. The define adult concern step is where the caregiver is entering their concern into consideration. The hard part about that is that us caregivers frequently don't know what our concerns are, usually because we've already moved on to our solutions, which we are usually busy imposing. What are you concerned about? Why is it important that this expectation be met? And why is it important that this expectation be met? Either because of how the unsolved problem is affecting the kid and or how the unsolved problem is affecting other people. The invitation. This is where you and the kid are putting your heads together, collaborating on a solution. But it's a solution that must meet 2 criteria. Got to be realistic, meaning both parties can truly do what they're agreeing to do. Got to be mutually satisfactory, meaning the solution truly addresses the concerns of both parties. Here's what I've been saying a lot lately, and world history, including current world events, bear me out on this. If the solution is not realistic and mutually satisfactory, I promise you, this problem is still unsolved. And it is only unsolved problems that cause concerning behaviors. Solved problems don't. Let me see what else I have for you here, because I want to turn to questions. I think I'm good on time. Many people want to know, and by the way, if you want to see video of Plan B being done, hop on the Lives in the Balance website. I actually consciously chose not to show video in this presentation because the shortest video I can show you is about 15 minutes long, and I didn't want to, because I've got video on the Lives in the Balance website. Livesinthebalance.org is where to go. But a question that a lot of people often have is, how is it that the research is telling us that you are enhancing skills just by solving problems collaboratively and proactively? Well, skills are being enhanced in each of the 3 steps of Plan B. Let's think about the empathy. Let's think about the empathy step, but first we have to think about whose skills. See, it's not just the kid whose skills are being enhanced through the process of Plan B. Caregivers' skills are being enhanced as well. What skills are being enhanced? That's the postman. He's being very loud today. He's a nice guy, just a little loud. What skills are being enhanced in the empathy step? If you're the kid, figuring out what your concerns are. Very important life skill. Figuring out how to express those concerns in a way that other people can understand. Very important life skill, and I'm not being exhaustive here. What skills are the caregivers learning in the empathy step? Listening, the purest form of empathy. Taking another person's perspective. I'm not being exhaustive. What skills is the kid, are we enhancing in the kid in the define adult concern step? Listening, empathy, taking another person's perspective, appreciating how one's behavior is affecting other people. What skills are the caregivers learning in the define adult concern step? The exact same skills the kid was learning in the empathy step. And what skills are both parties learning in the invitation? Resolving disagreements without conflict, generating alternative solutions, coming up with solutions that don't just work for you, but that work for somebody else, moving off of your original solution onto a solution that works for both parties. Goodness. Plan B isn't just solving problems. Plan B isn't just reducing challenging behavior. Solving problems collaboratively and proactively also enhances skills. And now, before questions, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. Question number 1. Why do the problems that affect kids' lives so often cause conflict between us and them? The answer, they don't have to. They're just problems. It all depends on how we're going about trying to solve those problems. Plan A is about power. Power causes conflict. Plan B is about collaboration. Collaboration brings people together. And finally, are the ways in which we're currently going about parenting, teaching, disciplining, and interacting with our kids, teaching the skills that are on the better side of human nature, empathy, taking another person's perspective, resolving disagreements without conflict? If the answer is no, you've just spent 54 to 55 minutes listening to one person's ideas about what we could be doing instead. And what we could be doing instead is why there are now schools all over the world that are doing 0 detentions, 0 suspensions, 0 expulsions, 0 paddling, and 0 restraints and seclusions. They're too busy solving problems collaboratively and proactively to do that stuff. Let me take a look at your questions, but up on the screen right now are all of the websites that will help you out. Lives in a Balance, tons of free resources. thekidswelose.com is where you can get more information about the documentary, The Kids We Lose. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out. And truecrisisprevention.org is our newest website. It is where you can get a boatload of free information on how to reduce and ultimately eliminate the use of restraint and seclusion in your school and facility. Let me turn to the Q&A box. And here we go. Who does the assessments? Is there a certain provider who would do them? In schools, it is a group effort. Anybody who has anything to do with the kid in the building. Same thing in facilities. In a family, a clinician might lead you through the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems, but you could do it on your own. A lot of folks do. When schools are set in their ways about approaches to handling behaviors, how do we get them to look at this in a new and different way? Well, there's a lot of free resources on the website, but what a lot of schools, well, here's a good idea. Use their current discipline data as your best ammo. Because if this school has a lot of detentions and suspensions, a lot of restraints and seclusions, something is very broken. And by the way, in every school, it's the same 10, 20, 30 kids who are accounting for 70 to 80% of the discipline referrals in that building. Proof that all those discipline referrals and what happens after them are not working. Use their discipline data. It's very persuasive. Beyond that, I always recommend that schools do a book study with my book, Lost at School. And this is not about book sales. This is about, it's a very persuasive book with Lost at School as the discussion guide. Very good way to persuade people. How does this work? I've got 3 minutes left. How does this work apply with an older child who has a history of behaviors that worsen with age? Can this history be undone? Age 16. I do this with 16, 17, 18-year-olds all the time. Many people have more trouble believing that I do it with 2- and 3-year-olds, but we do. And if the environment is not necessarily conducive, we'll have to work on that. That's going to be one of the most important parts. And if someone is not the caregiver or the school, how much influence can they have on this process? As much as you can manage. You may not be able to get it all, but at least you'll get something. And a little good is better than no good. How do they incorporate this if they are not directly involved in a hands-on, consistent way? Do the best you can. Do the best you can to help the people who are involved in a hands-on, consistent way to do this. One of my favorite questions, Dr. Greene, what are your thoughts on ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, for some children? Do you think ABA is ever appropriate? Sure. And I've got a lot of people who've been trained in ABA who love the model that you just heard about. It all depends on how the person was trained. I'm not going to say that ABA is ever inappropriate, but I am going to say that I haven't met the kid yet, no matter how quote unquote low functioning they were, who couldn't ultimately be engaged in solving the problems that affect their lives, participating in that process. And in many forms of ABA, the kid is a bystander, a recipient. It doesn't have to be that way, even for the kids for whom ABA is most commonly applied. Question for Ross, what determines whether they are communicating that they're having difficulty meeting expectations in a lucky or unlucky manner? Boy, I sure do wish the research had the answer to that question. I've been curious about that for a very long time. I think it's because they're either lucky or unlucky. And I'll do one more here because I know that there are a few announcements before we're done. Here's one. Doesn't lagging skills suggest a deficit model? What if we look for the skills they do have and what they do bring to their learning? I like focusing on strengths. It's just that the kids' strengths do not provide people who are still very oriented toward motivation with different lenses. So people often refer to this model as being strength-based. Bottom line is, what the research tells us about kids with concerning behaviors is that they are lacking skills. I actually have no way to transform that into something positive, except that it's very positive if it moves somebody off of motivational lenses and being punitive and onto lagging skill lenses, which is a significant improvement and is going to lead to very different ways in which they are viewing and treating this kid. So you're right, it's not strength-based. It is what the research is telling us. And boy, have I seen a lot of kids get treated a whole lot better once their caregivers came to the recognition that the kid was lacking skills, not motivation. On that point, I should probably be quiet and turn it back over to your sponsors. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I hope this has been useful to all of you, and please stay safe.